second thing we got to get into here, and this is just a very interesting conversation that was being had, and I don't really know what is going on, but after doing some digging, looking at where wide receiver needy teams are at the top of the draft, I think I have an answer to this all. Now, first, we'll just talk about the discussion surrounding the actual 40 time of Tet McMillan. So we'll take a look at this first tweet here, and I've got to say, I don't really know what is going on with the, I don't want to say it's misinformation, but just the conversation surrounding what the actual 40 time from his pro day was. So Jordan Schultz went out, and I feel like he was probably the first person to say something about it. He goes, Arizona wide receiver and projected top pick Tetairoa McMillan had his pro day today, where scouts in attendance clocked him at a 4.48 40-yard dash. So the 6'4", 219-pound first-team All-American had 24 NFL teams in attendance to watch him. Per source, 24 teams is a lot of teams for a pro day, but he is considered wide receiver 1 if you consider Travis Hunter to be cornerback number 1, and then I guess he would be wide receiver 2 if you consider Travis Hunter to be wide receiver number 1, just depending on what team ends up picking him and what they decide to do with him type deal, or depending on who you are talking to and where they would put everybody. I mean, I know a lot of people might just have Travis Hunter as wide receiver 1, corner number 1, but Tet's the true wide receiver number 1 in terms of just the uncertainty surrounding whatever Travis Hunter is supposed to play at the next level. Then the other tweet that I have for you all here, this one coming from Albert Breer. Pro day season is in full swing. An Arizona wide receiver, Tet McMillan, had his workout today. McMillan ran just one 40-yard dash. Just one. It was hand-timed at 4.54, 4.55, and 4.57 on the stopwatches of 3 teams I talked to. Workout was good otherwise, big-bodied guy, so times were expected. Now, this is where the conversation starts to come up for me, and this is where the idea started rolling in my head, is how could there be a near 10th of a second discrepancy? And I even saw some people throwing around something as high as 4.58, 4.59. How could there be such a wide discrepancy in the times? And I mean, obviously, human error is a real thing, but I mean, a whole 10th of a second is a long time in terms of a 40-yard dash. So there had to be people either sleeping on the stopwatch, or could we possibly be seeing some of those wide receiver needy teams trying to make his pro day look just a little less impressive in hopes that maybe he slips down the board? Now, there are a handful of teams, especially towards the top half of the draft, that could definitely use Tet McMillan's services and would love to be able to draft him, especially if the spot on the draft board is right. Now, we'll start with the team that pops up first. We'll kind of go in order of the picking. Patriots. They could definitely use a talent like Tet McMillan. Do not get me wrong. That team is devoid of talent at wide receiver. They absolutely need a number 1. And I do think that if Travis Hunter is not available to them and Abdul Carter is not available to them, they should be in on the Tet McMillan sweepstakes. But here's the thing. I don't think anyone's really sold on drafting Tet McMillan number 4. There's also the offensive line conversation right now, and if they should go after Will Campbell, if Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter are both off the board. So the conversation is everywhere in New England. But I do think a lot of people feel hesitant about drafting Tet McMillan at number 4. But there is the conversation that I've seen, I have heard, I have witnessed myself, I've even produced myself at my day job, about being able to trade back and then still landing Tet McMillan if the position is right, if the compensation is right, and if the trade back doesn't result in them end up losing him. So there is that conversation to be had. Then, just a few picks behind them at number 6, the Raiders. Now, the Raiders went ahead, made a big trade, swung big, got Geno Smith in the room. Pete Carroll's obviously taken over as head coach over there as well. You already have 2 strong receiving threats in Jacoby Myers, who cracked 1,000 yards this season. Brock Bowers, rookie phenom, all-pro tight end, his first season in the NFL. If you go out there and you draft Tet McMillan at number 6, you stay put, you don't trade up for a quarterback or anything like that, you're truly going to roll with Geno Smith for the next 2 or 3 years, so you don't have that pressure anymore to go draft a quarterback. Well, You bring in a Tet McMillan, yeah, the running game is not ideal, and I do think that Ashton Genty would be not a bad option for the Raiders to be looking into, even if they were like maybe to trade back from like 6 to, to 8, 9, 10, something like that, get a couple extra picks and then draft him because they don't have a running game over there. That is also a viable option, but if you want to go the receiver route, at number 6, Tet McMillan, after you watch a Will Campbell go off the board, a Travis Hunter go off the board, an Abdul Carter go off the board, and assuming like 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks go off, or 2 quarterbacks go off the board before you're picking, potentially 3, depending on what happens. I like the idea of Tet McMillan there. You put yourself into a situation where you have a 3-headed receiving monster to work with for Geno Smith. I would say that is conducive of a productive season on Smith's end, so I would be all in on that. You go back a few more picks, sitting at number 9, you're looking at the Saints. Now, this is where it starts to make more sense, I would say, in terms of teams starting to be like, no, he didn't run a 4.48. He ran a 4.57, 4.58, 4.59, something like that. This is where those numbers coming out start to make more sense to me because you're starting to pick now at the back of the top 10. Maybe he's out of your reach, just kind of depends on what happens in front of you. Offense could absolutely use a shot in the arm in New Orleans. Alvin Kamara is obviously only getting older. Chris Olave, young, talented wide receiver. The concussion issues are something you just quite simply can't ignore at this stage in his career. And then on top of that, this is a team that, because of the way they're doing their cap numbers every single season, it feels like we just watch talent leave and they don't really have the opportunity to bring people in. They do rely heavily on the draft to kind of replenish their roster every single year because they're simply not able to spend during free agency because they spend the entire lead up going into free agency just trying to get themselves like $100,000 under the cap number. I mean, it feels like every offseason these guys jump into it like negative 60, 70, 80 million over the cap and they have to just kick the can down the road every single season. And I thought that this would be the year that maybe they would go for a full-blown reset and stop doing that, but nope, they're gung-ho on doing it. So for a team picking at number 9, who in my eyes could use, again, a shot in the arm on offense, give Derek Carr another receiving threat, help that room get a little bit more talented, this is a group that I think would really benefit from A, drafting Tet McMillan, but B, also putting out that maybe his 40 time was a little bit slower than what some of those faster times are trying to say. Like, there feels like there could be some gamesmanship here. And then you push a little bit further back in the draft, and this is one that I'm a little bit more out on, but it was a note that I had put in prior to the Cooper Kupp trade. The Seahawks at number 18, I saw a lot of mock drafts at one time pushing the Seahawks at 18, drafting Tet McMillan and watching him fall that whole way, and I think a lot of that had to do with just 40-yard dash time conversation and just how fast of a receiver he actually was. And seeing him land at the Seahawks at number 18 is definitely something that would be interesting, but I think only happens if teams are really out on Tet because he's just not quite fast enough, or they feel that maybe he's not quite fast enough. And that is where you get further into that conversation of teams putting out a slower 40-yard dash on their end just to maybe muddy the waters a little bit and go, and maybe force a team to question whoever it was that had that stopwatch that clocked the 4.5, the 4.48, the 4.49, whatever the number seems to be right now. Because again, you take a look around on social media, there's a lot of numbers flying around based off of what Tet McMillan got. And again, the highest I think I saw was 4.59. And Jordan Schultz, the tweet we showed earlier, obviously showing 4.48. That is technically 0.11 of a difference in time altogether. So I mean, if there's gamesmanship going on, I think it's pretty apparent. I just don't think, and again, human error is a real thing. I get that, but in this game that the NFL plays during this time of year, where people are saying things through closed doors, back channeling stuff, trying to get guys stock to fall so they can get guys to land at them. Yes, human error is a real thing, but at the same time, if a team like the Saints, like the Seahawks, maybe someone between number 9 and number 18 that's interested in getting Tet McMillan but feels like, we're probably not going to get him because he's going to go too high, are just leaking out lower 40-yard dash times to maybe sway some people's opinions, well, would not be too surprised.